throw. One-on-one. Davis has it. Touchdown. Carolina wins. Carolina is the Coastal Division champion. Javonte Williams to the left of Howell. He'll send him out into the flat right side. Howell looking, standing tall, lets it go. Man there. Touchdown. Touchdown, Carolina. The pistol. Jackson behind him. Hands off to Jackson. He tried a jump pass, and it's intercepted. Surratt intercepts it. Holy cow, Carolina's going to win. And off to Javonte Williams again. Pops it to the left. Javonte leaps over a man, crosses the 50, trucks over a defender, spins by another. Goodness gracious, he's down to about the 15, and he did absolutely everything in one carry. Here's the shotgun snap to Aguilar. Drops back. Pressure coming. Aguilar floats it up. Incomplete. No flags. Head on back up the mountain. Carolina wins it in double overtime. Loftus out of the shotgun. Throws to the end zone. Incomplete. Incomplete. The bell belongs to us. Carolina wins it. 47-45 in double overtime. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, here with you guys as always. Zack Hubbard expected to join us here tonight. I think he's having some internet connection issues, but it is going to be an exciting night of the podcast here as we got to recap the last two editions that Carolina has made in the 2026 recruiting trail. Carolina has landed a 3-star interior offensive lineman in Will Conroy, so we'll talk about him. They also have a jumbo tight end that they added today. And yes, jumbo tight end is the correct way to talk about him. We told you about Avian Williams the last time that we were on an edition of the podcast, but man, this is really a jumbo tight end that Carolina added today. So we'll tell you about him, Aiden Woods, and then, of course, we will finish up with some conversation about Travis Burgess and his performance at the Elite 11 Finals down there in Los Angeles. What a performance he had for himself, and he is trending upward. So hopefully we will have Zack with us. Here he is right here, Zack Hubbard joining us here. So, yeah, I mean, first of all, what are your thoughts just on the two additions that Carolina made recently? I think Will Conroy, who we'll start by talking about right here, the bigger of the two additions, and certainly one that I think you would classify as one of the headliners of this class right now with where everything sits and with that offensive line position being one that they've hit so hard so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we've mentioned on several editions, this is a position that they hit hard in the portal. This is one that we knew was going to be emphasized in 2026. So it's one that they've continued to add guys, even going up to 6 at this point with, who knows if they add a 7th or what the numbers are going to be between increased roster size, more mobility in college football. It's really hard to get a huge sort of, handle on what the numbers are going to be at any given position per year. But like I said, we've known that this is a position of emphasis, and with Conroy, they get a guy that is, at least per the 24/7 composite, the highest rated guy in their class on the offensive line. Pretty strictly an interior guy between 6'2" and 6'3", likely projects as a center on that offensive line. But one of the things, just first and foremost, that sticks out to me is where he plays high school ball there at IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida. You sort of have that connection with the new coaching staff, with his former coach joining the staff as a position coach moving into 2025. So you see that connection. IMG Academy in Florida is a place that North Carolina has been trying to make headway at for a while. It's a school that is recruited nationally. You know, the big brands, especially in the Southeast, your Floridas, your Georgias, Alabamas, Ohio States, Clemson's, they all recruit at this school. So, you know, it's a place that North Carolina has been trying to get involved in, and to get a guy this caliber at a position of need, specifically there at the center position, like you mentioned, this is a huge addition to the class.
Yeah, and this is going to be his first year at IMG Academy. Came over from St. Ignatius High School up there in the Cleveland area, but this is a connection that Carolina was really hoping would play out with some of the guys that are in this 2026 class. And to this point, it hadn't really paid dividends for Carolina, bringing in a guy like Billy Miller, who is a special teams assistant, but also was brought in to be a really good high school recruiter. And they thought IMG Academy was one area that they would be able to get into. This is one where Carolina really had to work for it, because Oklahoma had him committed. And not only was he committed, he was a guy that was very vocal in terms of he was going to stay committed. He was recruiting other guys, including his own high school teammate, Jake Cruel, the edge rusher that I had on my most wanted list when we started talking about the 2026 recruiting class. And he was a guy that was trying to get him to Oklahoma. He ends up visiting Chapel Hill back on June 13th, and everything sort of changes. And it really started before then. When Bill Belichick got into contact with him back in January, that's really where things started to change. And, he got on campus in March, and that official visit on June 13th was really all that he needed to officially flip his commitment to Carolina. And so this is a big one for the Tar Heels, because as you mentioned, a guy that's coming in to play the center position, Carolina has not necessarily recruited the center position these last few years. Really what they've done is they've gone into the transfer portal and gotten their guys. You got to look at their last two starters that they've had at the position. Austin Blaske, a transfer that came over from Georgia. And then prior to that, Carolina had Corey Gaynor, who of course came over from Miami as a transfer. Now this year, it looks like there's a chance that Austin Blaske is going to move to right guard. So you're saying, okay, well, is there a true freshman or, a guy that was recruited by Carolina taking over? No, that's expected to be Christo Kelly, at least from what we saw in the spring. And so it looks like Carolina is going to have yet another transfer that's going to be starting for them at the center position this year. So for them to get someone out of the high school ranks, a guy that I think has plenty of versatility. I mean, you're talking about a guy that's going to play center at IMG Academy, but has played guard and has been very successful, and has played right tackle and has been successful there as well. You look at his size. This is always going to be the most important thing that people are going to ask. No matter what, I've seen multiple people that ask it, no matter what position it is, but especially when you're talking about offensive and defensive linemen. The guys in the trenches, they want to know the size. And he's got pretty good size at 6'2.5", 280 pounds. And he's definitely the type of player that Carolina is wanting to bring in along their offensive line. He plays with the mean streak that, we've been looking to add to that room really for, the last few years, but especially under Bill Belichick. And he really does a good job of finishing blocks, because he adds up a lot of pancake blocks and opens a lot of holes for his running backs, which was one of the big things that I think IMG Academy saw with him and immediately wanted him to be able to do. His athleticism allows him to thrive as a pull blocker. That's going to be huge, especially as a center and as a guy that can play either of the guard positions as well. If Carolina wants him to play one of those guard positions, that's going to come in handy for him there. His team last year at St. Ignatius did a pretty decent amount of that with him at right guard. His lateral movement, pretty solid, allows him to stay in front of most edge rushers that he faces at the high school level, but certainly an area that he was going to have to improve at the college level if he was going to play tackle. With him being on the interior, his pass protection shouldn't be much of an issue, because he plays with a nice violent streak and does have that upper body strength that you're looking for that allows him to succeed against interior defensive linemen. I think this is, a nice new headliner for the offensive line class and someone that could be trending up as the season goes on, especially if he ends up succeeding along that offensive line for IMG Academy. So I really like this pickup, and I think this is one of those guys that's right outside of that top 500 that we've talked about, Zach, so often when we're looking for blue chip guys. But it feels like he really is on the precipice of becoming one of those guys. And when you go to a school like IMG Academy, that really should only boost his recruiting ranking throughout the year and allow Carolina to potentially get a player that is a riser as we go throughout, the next few months.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's a guy that's going to be able to show his stuff, like you mentioned, on the national stage. He's going to go up against some of the best interior defensive linemen in the country, some of the best teams in the country. So, I think it's a big win for North Carolina. But again, it is just a fact of the matter, not only in the past transfer portal cycle, but moving into 2026 recruiting. The line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball is a premium position of need, of want, whatever word you want to put on there. That's the focus here. So some people, like I said, may look and see, they've already got 6 guys. Are they adding any more? Can they take the 6 that they have? It looks like with so many of these interior guys, they're just looking for, who can we find? Who can we throw into the fire and see, how they respond to that pressure. So this is a guy you definitely want to take a chance on, or not so much take a chance. He's the highest rated guy on your offensive line right now in the 2026 class. But this is a guy that you feel really good about adding to this room alongside the other guys. So just, we're going to put guys in a room and see what we get as it relates to those lines of scrimmage.
Yeah. And, the thing for me is that when you compare him to some of the other interior offensive line guys, I mean, yeah, there are guys that are clearly, I think, going to be interior offensive linemen. He's the only guy that's going to be a center. So for me, there's no question that he's going to contribute at some point for Carolina. And then when you look at guys like Anthony Hall, Zion Smith, I think both of those guys are probably going to stay as interior offensive linemen. I think that's where they're probably going to be most successful. But I've said it, when you look at Eli Raquel, I think that's a guy that could certainly play offensive tackle. Same thing with Mason Wilhelm. I think that's a guy at 6'4", 285 pounds. If he stays in that area and translates over from what he's doing in high school, where he is an offensive tackle, then I think, there's potential for him to stay out there as well. So I think the interior of the offensive line is certainly an area that Carolina has done a really good job at. It doesn't seem like they're necessarily 100% done there, because if Brandon Anderson, who announced earlier today that he's going to commit on Sunday, if he's wanting to come to Carolina, that's a 4-star prospect out of Kennesaw, Georgia, that you would have to take. I mean, he's too talented. He's a guy that fits exactly what Carolina is wanting on the interior of their offensive line at 6'4", 320 pounds. So that guy would certainly be a take in my mind, I think. And then in terms of the other offensive line spot, the offensive tackle spot, I mean, again, you got to think Carolina's only got one confirmed offensive tackle commit in this class, and that is Nick Fiamora. And as a guy that's 6'5", 295, he's a guy that who knows where Carolina is going to end up playing him. They could look at him as potentially an interior guy as well. So I think they certainly are still looking to potentially add someone at that offensive tackle position. I think the guys to keep an eye on right there, Thomas Wilder, that would certainly be a take. 4-star prospect out of the state of Virginia. I think right now trending more towards Virginia Tech, but if something was to change there, I would believe that Carolina would be, willing to take him, no questions asked, as a 4-star prospect. And then you've also got Tyreek Jimison, who I think is, one of those guys that is sort of trending to his home state team as well. I think Georgia Tech is probably the area that they're looking at for him. I've also seen that a lot of people project him probably on the interior of the offensive line. So that's one that certainly makes a little bit of sense if he ends up heading somewhere besides Chapel Hill But the one to keep an eye on really is Trip Skews. That is the 3-star offensive tackle out of the state of Colorado. Carolina did a really good job getting him on campus back at the start of the month. And by all accounts, that official visit went pretty well. And so Carolina, I think, has a shot here, although in-state Colorado is there, as well as Vanderbilt and Texas Tech. But that's certainly one that I think Carolina would take as well. I don't think there's too many more takes, but I do think that that's still a spot that Carolina is potentially looking to add 1 or 2 more talented players at if they are willing to commit. All right, now let's move on to today's commitment, and that's 2026 3-star tight end Aiden Woods, who announced his commitment to Carolina following his official visit to campus over the weekend earlier today. He chose the Tar Heels over offers from West Virginia, Syracuse, and Wake Forest, amongst others. Really, West Virginia was the only other school that he had taken a visit to. So it seemed like this was Carolina's once they got him on campus. Woods, definitely a guy that is a big-time projection type player. He is ranked as the 1,563rd overall prospect in the class, ranked as the number 81 tight end in the class, according to 24/7 Sports composite player rankings. Hails from Abington High School in Abington, Virginia. And, this past year as a junior was named a first-team All-Region and second-team All-District member as a tight end, and a second-team All-Region and first-team All-District member as a defensive end. The biggest thing about him is that when we say that this is a jumbo tight end, this is the definition of a jumbo tight end. This is a dude that stands, according to his Twitter page, and he may have added some weight in the offseason. I don't know if that's 100% confirmed, but watching him on tape, I would say that he's playing pretty close to the weight that he has on his Twitter page. He measures in at 6'5", 280 pounds. So we just talked about Will Conroy along the offensive line, a center who weighs in at 280 pounds. Now you got a tight end that's weighing in at 280 pounds. This is a monster of a man, and he is exactly, Zack, what I thought he was going to be when I turned on his film. He is an absolute mauler in the run game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's something that they've been looking for in this class specifically, regardless of where he ends up. I mean, this pickup is really intriguing to me just because of that sort of projection that we're looking at there, but also the versatility. I mean, with his size, 6'6", 280 right now, it's not hard pressed to see him as a guy that, stays at tight end and is sort of a mauling, blocking tight end, which I think is something that they really want to have here. I think they want to play a lot of 12 personnel. They want to have a lot of 2 tight ends on the field, and they want to have a guy that is a designated blocker to add advantage in the run game. This is, if you look at any offense that Bill Belichick has had, running the football and staying ahead of schedule in that aspect has always been a key, and the tight ends have been a key. And we've mentioned that, numerous times. So getting a guy that's sort of a designated, potentially early player as a blocker, that's huge, just to be able to sort of build out that versatility of being able to be in 12 personnel, being able to sort of run or pass out of the same personnel and, have those options there. But then on the flip side, based on his size, he's already at 280. He's already sort of has the frame potentially to play offensive line or offensive tackle. We've seen situations at North Carolina and other places where you have guys that sort of come in as these big tight ends. They grow, which is natural in college, and become and flourish into these sort of offensive tackle positions. So there's also that option that, he sort of outgrows the tight end position overall and then sort of becomes this athletic offensive tackle, really. So it's sort of a win-win upside play here that I really like. I like both of those options. Both of those, sort of scenarios are needs not only in this class, but on this team. So there's a ton to like. And, North Carolina fans, Tar Heel fans have been looking for this team, to get better at blocking along both sides of scrimmage, but that offensive line specifically, and at the tight end position as well. So I think either option, you're going to be happy with what you get from Aiden Woods more likely than not.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little different. I'm not going to lie to you. And this is the second big tight end that Carolina has taken on. So Avian Williams, we thought that he was a guy at his size that was going to be relatively big. And he's a guy that also I think has some potential as a defensive line player. I have watched the defensive film from Aiden Woods. I don't really think there's much there. To be honest with you, I think he is a guy that's sticking on the offensive side of the ball, and that's just something that you have to become comfortable with. But, I mean, when you talked about Avian Williams, I mean, you saw some of the athleticism as a tight end. It made a little bit of sense. I mean, he's 6'6", 245 pounds. That's still a big guy. That's a guy that you would expect would be a pretty good blocker. At 280 pounds, you're definitely expecting that this is a guy that is going to be able to block at a high level. And that's exactly what he does. I mean, he overpowers guys with his upper body strength and his physicality, does a great job of finishing blocks, piles up those pancake blocks in the run game primarily. They did use him a little bit as a pass protector. Wasn't the fleetest of foot. I think that's certainly something that he's going to have to work on, especially if he is going to play offensive tackle at the next level. It's just that's what's kind of weird is that he really is a guy that shined as a run blocker primarily. And there's guys that are offensive tackles at the high school level that do pretty much just the majority of what their what their high school offense does, which is run the football. But this is one of those guys where there are a handful of clips of him in pass protection, maybe one or two in his highlight film. And so if you are projecting him as an offensive lineman, there is going to be work to do here. But at his size, I think anything really is possible. I think this is another one of those, and I've said it a lot with a lot of the guys that Carolina has gotten in this class. It's another piece of clay. This is a guy that comes in here. You really don't know ultimately what he's going to be, but there are so many possibilities with him that you are intrigued. And I think that's kind of where this staff is at. You could have him lose a decent amount of weight and still be a guy that is a really strong blocker, but someone that can actually help you a little bit as a receiver as well. You could use him as basically an H-back, which is just a tight end that basically blocks. And that's certainly something that I think you would be more apt to see from Bill Belichick than just about anybody else in college football with his pro-style attack that he plays with. And then, there is the option to have him become an offensive lineman. I personally would love the H-back scenario. I think that would be very welcomed for Carolina. And people will say, well, is there really room on the roster for a guy like that in modern college football? Remember that you now have 105 scholarships. If that's one guy that's on your roster that is there to be a primary blocking tight end, basically a version of a fullback for the most part, but someone that lines up along the front line, then I think you're going to take that as Carolina. You'll say, you know what, let's see if this ends up working. And I do think that's one of the areas that they are hoping they can find somebody this year at the tight end position that can be able to do that for them. This is a guy that could come in starting next year, and it might be years down the line before Carolina ends up using him, but we'll just have to wait and see. The thing is that if he is going to develop into a receiver, he definitely has a lot of work to do because he looks like an offensive lineman running routes. There's no doubt about that. He's very far from the most polished route runner. The good news is that he does have pretty promising hands, especially for a guy of his size. But I do think that he is going to have to be able to run a little bit better. He's going to have to be more effective after the catch if he's going to be a guy that catches the ball that much in the offense for Carolina. So I'm really interested to see ultimately what they do with him. And it's just one of those guys that I think for Carolina fans, because I had, a couple Carolina fans that were telling me earlier today, look, I want to get some of the big name guys. I think some of those guys are coming, but I think that what they're doing right now is they're looking for guys that fit the sort of system that they're going to want to play. And this is one of those guys where if they're going to want to run the ball at a really high rate, this is someone that can probably come in there and help them do that. And so I think you should be willing to take this on. I think you need to go into it with expectations that are relatively low and maybe be a little bit surprised. Like, I wouldn't expect this guy to be someone that is going to be one of Carolina's best players, is going to be a guy that factors into the offense all that much. But yeah, I mean, if you are okay with the fact that he can be an H-back for you, that eventually becomes that blocking tight end that Carolina is really wanting in this offense, then I think you'll be satisfied soon enough with what you're getting. It's just that the guys that are the big names that Carolina is going after, they're taking a little bit more time to decide. But I believe here in the next couple of weeks, as we go through what is going to be a crazy stretch of commitments, I mean, it really starts, the ones that stick out to me really start on Friday. And then after that, it really just continues from there. I know Thursday there is one for Carolina as well. That's right. So Thursday is really where it starts with Zamorius Robinson, who's going to announce his commitment. That could really be the start of where Carolina starts to land some of these bigger names. And Robertson is not one of those guys, but I do think that from then on, you'll see some big names announcing on the 27th. July 1st is an incredibly popular date where we've seen a bunch of guys schedule their commitments for that date. So that'll be one where we'll be monitoring all day on that day. And then as we go throughout, the holiday weekend and then into the next couple of weeks, I think that's where you'll really see the majority of these big names starting to announce their decisions. One big name that has announced his decision, of course, and is a member of Carolina's 2026 class is their quarterback, Travis Burgess. And he was out at the Elite 11 Finals, and he shined. He had himself a really successful weekend for himself out there. Opening day, a little all over the board for him in terms of where he was ranked. But by all accounts, he did, a pretty good amount of work out there in the quarterback drills to get himself on a lot of the radars of the guys that were covering this. Andrew Ivins, who we're hoping to have on here on the podcast here soon, he had him as fourth after the first day, while Charles Powers of On3 Sports didn't have him ranked in the top 11, but you did have Adam Giorni of Rivals, who did rank him seventh after the first day. So for the most part, really jumped on to the page for a lot of these big names that cover the that cover the event. And then, of course, the most important ones were the official rankings that came out from the Elite 11 staff, and they had him at 11th through the first day. On to day two, that's really where he shined, which was the pro day. According to Charles Powers, he completed 18 of his 20 passes, the best mark of any quarterback who participated in the drill on that second night. This performance immediately vaulted him up a lot of the boards for the analysts, including Power, who had him as the second best quarterback on day two. Andrew Ivins ranked him third, and Adam Gorney ranked him as the 10th performer on the second day. But again, for the most part, really caught the eyes of those guys, really stood out amongst the group, and was positioning himself to be one of the Elite 11 finalists. As for the staff, they saw it as well, as he jumped from 11th to 6th after day two, and it put him in a position where all he had to do was have a strong performance in the 7-on-7 portion, and he would have himself amongst the final 11, and that's exactly what he did. Day three was the 7-on-7 portion, and he, was one of the guys that definitely stood out. There were conflicting reports about how many touchdowns were thrown by him in his 21 passes, but he did complete 13 of his throws, according to Charles Power, for 3 touchdowns. Tom Loy of 24/7 had him with 4 touchdowns. He tweeted out all the videos. So I'm going to go with Tom Loy on that one as 4 different touchdowns out of the 13 completions that he had, including one where he threw it in between 2 defenders. Some people debating as to whether or not that's a good or bad throw, but when you throw it in between two defenders and find a way to get it to your receiver, more often than not, that's going to be seen as a pretty successful throw. Regardless, Burgess did enough, and when it was announced by the Elite 11 staff, the official quarterbacks, Elite 11 quarterbacks for this year, he was one of the guys, one of the members of that Elite 11. He did not take home the MVP, which is not really the biggest deal in the world. Dia Bell did take that home, but still, Carolina, they've had a lot of quarterbacks who have gone out there, many who have earned Elite 11 status, but still yet to have someone that has taken home the MVP. But still, I think this is a great showing for a three-star prospect, Zach, that I think really helped his stock. And that's one of the things that I think is going to be interesting, is seeing how his stock trends after a tremendous performance out there in the most elite quarterback competition that we see every single year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm telling tales out of school here, but I think it's pretty easy and pretty, resolute to say that he has likely raised his stock to be in that sort of 4-star or higher range moving forward. I don't know when those rankings come out, if it's sometime here, over the next few weeks in July or August or whenever, but likely we'll see him sort of make that rise, maybe not to the extent that we saw with a guy like Bryce Baker, but certainly up into that sort of radius of likely top 300, top 200, something along those lines at the very least. Definitely great to see him sort of show his stuff on the national stage. I mean, he's a guy that we thought was pretty good, pretty underrated for where he was specifically. But we've sort of seen him go out and validate what we saw on the film. Obviously plays at a very competitive high school there in Georgia. So he's going to have a lot of eyes on him this upcoming season. So there's really not a set limit as to how far he can rise. So I expect when it's all said and done, he could very well be the, top rated player in this class, similar to what we saw from Bryce Baker last year. But really, really good showing, and really validates sort of the recruiting that we've seen in a short period of time by Bill Belichick and this staff, and a good addition just to keep adding guys to this room and feel like you're going to continue to have an option at the position, the most important position on the offense for what will be likely several years to come.
Yeah, I think it justifies everything that we were saying about him at the time, that this was a guy that was much better than his ranking would tell you. Now, Rivals has responded. They have him as a 4-star prospect. That was before he even went out there to LA. They were on that. But I think, again, when we talked about him, the reason why he was only a 3-star prospect is because he had only started for 1 year. But you look at that 1 year, last year, completed 60.2% of his passes for 2,225 yards, 23 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. Also carried the ball 58 times for 596 yards and 4 touchdowns. I mean, this is a guy that was extremely productive. It was just, he kind of got lost in the shuffle. Being a 1-year starting quarterback, I think certainly hurts him, as opposed to some of these other guys who are 2, sometimes 3-year starters by the time that they get through their junior season. And so I think that's part of the reason why he was ranked where he was. This was an opportunity for him to show that he is one of the elite quarterbacks in the country and that he deserves to be ranked as a 4-star prospect. And the good news is that, On 3 Sports, they list him as a composite, 4-star. I'm not sure what their overall ranking is. They have that locked. Their website has locked their rankings. In the past, it was available where you could see where each site ranked him, but they have, of course, as you would expect, once their site started having a little more success, they've made that something that you have to get behind a paywall. ESPN still has him ranked as a 3-star prospect, but the most important thing is that 24/7 Sports, Andrew Ivins was there. He's certainly a guy that I think is going to have a big say in him becoming a 4-star prospect on 24/7's rankings. And if he does, that's when you think he probably gets that boost that puts him over the top and makes him a 4-star composite prospect. So we'll have to wait and see. The one thing that I do think, is obvious is that, with this type of performance, there could be other schools that end up coming after him. Auburn was a school that was after him heavily. That's a school that's not going to go away, especially because they recruit Grayson High School incredibly well. So you would imagine that they are going to continue to keep the heat on him, but there could be other schools, Zach, that end up coming into the fold for Carolina. So I think one thing that's important is after this performance, Carolina's got to realize that they have to keep themselves accountable in this race, and they've got to make sure that they are staying on top of this one, because this is one, especially as an out-of-state guy, that if they're not careful, could get away from them because a bigger offer comes his way.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, this is going to be the sort of cornerstone of your class here. Has been thus far in the official visit season here over the last month. But, this is going to be the guy that you continue to build this class around. This is going to be a guy that you're going to want to try to sell on the recruiting trail to other offensive recruits in the 2027-2028 class of, hey, we're not only bringing in this guy in your class, but you get to go play and, be part of offenses with guys like Bryce Baker, like Travis Burgess, sort of pitches along those lines. So yeah, absolutely critical. They keep him in the class. I feel like they've got a good chance to, after sort of winning out initially over Auburn and schools of that nature. But, we'll have to see. The fall is sort of fast approaching, and things can get crazy then. So we'll see if there's anything to sort of monitor at that time. But I do think that having success on the field here this fall, not only for him but for numerous recruits, committed and uncommitted, can really sort of assuage any of those concerns. So I think that the onus is going to be on this staff to sort of hit the ground running in 2025 and see what they can do to sort of sell who they are, as we've discussed several times, sort of show their identity, show how they can be successful on the field this fall.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing, and I think you're right. It's really for everybody in this class. They have to prove that they are as good as they're saying they are to these kids when they go in their houses and they talk to them. Because, talk is one thing, but when you're able to back it up on the field, that's when you're really going to find the most success. And so I think with Burgess and with just about every other big name that Carolina has committed to this class, it's up to them to be able to show the results on the field to make sure that they keep them. Although I trust that this staff is going to be on top of Burgess. I think they, I'm not going to say we're surprised by his commitment, but certainly I think it was something that happened relatively quickly after it looked like Auburn was favored by a lot of the recruiting websites. It looked like things were heading in that direction, and Carolina was able to swing it. So I do think that they're going to definitely be staying on top of him. It's just, about being able to give these guys something to stay committed to. I think that's going to be important. We'll have you covered on the website, HeelToughBlog.com, with any other news that comes out around the recruiting trail. Of course, make sure you head over to the website right now, guys. Check out that article that's up there about Aiden Woods that we posted. Goes a little more in depth than we did even here tonight. So make sure you check that out. I broke down everything from, unfortunately, non-existent high school stats. So I wasn't able to put those in there, but did break down his film for you guys. So make sure you go and check that out. There are a few other guys that are getting ready to commit. I told you about Zamorius Robinson. Go back, read the article on him, a guy out of the state of South Carolina that the Tar Heels are trying to land. Brandon Anderson announced earlier today that he is going to be revealing his commitment on Sunday. So go back and read that article, the chances that Carolina ends up landing him. And then, of course, there are a couple other big name guys that will be announcing on July 1st. That would be Amari Johnson, who is, was at one time committed to Carolina. There are people that are believing that there is a chance that he could recommit to Carolina. And then his high school teammate, Darian Albert, is going to be deciding between Carolina and Tennessee. The four-star defensive line prospect is a big target for Carolina. They had him on campus back in April. So they're hoping that they can get this pair of high school teammates. Read that article that's up there for you guys as well. And then, of course, you can even go back and read the other commitment article that we were talking to you guys about, and the article that we have on Travis Burgess. You got the Will Conroy article that's up there from 6 days ago. 4 days ago, we have the article up there from Travis Burgess. So we encourage you to go back, read both of those articles, and keep yourself prepared. It's going to be a crazy couple of weeks here for the Tar Heels as they see a bunch of different guys that were major targets or are major targets still to this point get ready to announce their commitments. So make sure you stay on top of it at HeelTopBlog.com. Meanwhile, on the basketball side of things, starting to roll in some offers on the 2026 and 2027 recruiting trail. Both Hubert Davis and Jim Tanner, as well as some of the staff. They've been evaluating some of these guys on the recruiting trail. They're handing out those offers. Josh has an article up there for you about the offers that Carolina has been handing out. So make sure you check that out as well. And of course, any news that comes around the football program or the basketball program when it comes to the on-field or on-court stuff, we will, of course, have you covered with that as well. Best thing to do, check the website morning, afternoon, and evening. Easy way to do it, too, is to go over to the Twitter page and make sure you're following the page and then immediately turning on those post notifications so that whenever we post an edition of the podcast, an article, anything like that, you will immediately be notified on Twitter. It'll let you know, and you can go in and check out whatever piece of new content we have put up there. You can go over to the Facebook page as well, give it a like. That'll tell you when we have live videos that are up, but it will not give you an update that we do have a new article that comes out. It will appear on your timeline, though, so that'll be convenient for you as well. Make sure you guys go over and do that. We'd greatly appreciate it. But that wraps it up for this edition of the podcast. Want to thank Zack for hosting with me. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.